I was kneeling in the mud, fighting to save my vines from an early frost, when a $300 champagne cork hit me in the shoulder. I looked up to see my sister, Bella, standing on my terrace, wearing a white gown, laughing with her fiancé's billionaire parents. She pointed at me and said, "Don't worry about the gardener. She's just a hired hand we keep around out of pity." She didn't realize that the hired hand she just insulted owns the deed to the entire estate. She also didn't know I was supposed to be in Paris right now, but I came home early. She thought she had pulled off the perfect crime. I was about to turn her dream engagement party into a crime scene investigation. To understand why I was kneeling in the mud in the middle of a Friday afternoon instead of sitting in a cafe in Paris, I have to talk about the biggest obsession of my life: Aldridge Estate and Winery. I am Catherine Aldridge, 34 years old, owner and operator of one of Napa Valley's most respected boutique vineyards. Behind my back, the staff calls me the Ice Queen. I've earned it. I don't smile much. I don't do small talk. I show up at dawn and leave after dark. I inspect every vine personally, taste every barrel, approve every label. Some people think I'm cold. I think I'm careful. There's a difference. 2 weeks ago, I had scheduled a business trip to Paris, meetings with French distributors, tours of Bordeaux vineyards, the kind of networking that keeps a small operation like mine competitive. I'd blocked out the calendar, briefed the staff, packed my bags. Everything was arranged. Then the weather forecast changed. An unusual cold front was sweeping down from Canada, bringing with it the threat of an early frost that could annihilate my entire $1 million Merlot harvest. The grapes were at that delicate stage, ripe enough to pick, but not yet picked. One night of freezing temperatures would turn them to mush. I didn't hesitate. I canceled Paris at the last minute, rebooked my flight home, and drove straight from the airport to the North Vineyard, wearing the first work clothes I could grab from my mudroom. Heavy waterproof coveralls, rubber boots that came up to my knees, a wool cap pulled down over my ears. The ground was already cold, the mud thick and clinging. I directed the crew as they rolled out the wind machines and set up the irrigation sprinklers for frost protection. My knees sank into the wet earth as I checked the soil temperature with my bare hands, calculating how many hours we had before the freeze hit. That's when I heard the engines. At first, I thought it was a delivery truck that had gotten lost, but when I looked up from the vine rows, I saw a convoy of luxury limousines winding up the long driveway toward the main villa. Black cars, polished to a mirror shine, moving in a stately procession like a funeral for someone very rich and very important. I stood up, mud dripping from my coveralls, confusion turning quickly to alarm. The estate schedule was supposed to be completely empty during my absence. We'd closed the tasting room for deep cleaning. The event staff had the week off. There shouldn't be anyone here except the skeleton maintenance crew. I started walking toward the villa, my boots squelching with every step. From the North Vineyard, it's about a quarter mile to the main house, a beautiful stone mansion that my great-grandfather built in 1921, all arched windows and ivy-covered walls. As I got closer, I could hear music, laughter, the clink of glasses. A party. Someone was throwing a party in my house. I approached from the side, staying low behind the hedgerows that bordered the formal gardens. When I reached the stone terrace that overlooks the valley, I finally saw them. The terrace was full of people. Maybe 40 guests, all dressed in cocktail attire, holding champagne flutes and mingling under the late afternoon sun. Waiters in black vests circulated with silver trays. A string quartet played something classical and expensive-sounding near the fountain. And there, at the center of it all, wearing a white designer gown that probably cost more than my monthly payroll, was my sister, Bella. She was 27, 7 years younger than me, and we couldn't have been more different. Where I was practical and blunt, she was charming and manipulative. Where I worked 16-hour days to keep the vineyard profitable, she'd spent the last decade bouncing between failed acting gigs and rich boyfriends. Our parents had always favored her, their beautiful, vivacious baby girl who could do no wrong. I hadn't spoken to Bella in 6 months. The last time we'd talked, she'd asked me for a loan to cover her rent. I'd said no. She'd called me selfish. I'd hung up. Now she was standing on my terrace, laughing with a tall, handsome man I didn't recognize, and an older couple who radiated wealth, the way plutonium radiates heat. I stood up, ready to march over there and demand an explanation. That's when the champagne cork hit me. It struck my left shoulder with surprising force. A small projectile launched from an expensive bottle some guest had just opened. The cork bounced off my muddy coveralls and landed in the grass. Everyone on the terrace turned to look at me. I must have been quite a sight. Covered head to toe in mud, hair plastered to my skull, rubber boots caked in vineyard dirt. I looked like a creature that had crawled out of a swamp. "Don't worry about the gardener," Bella said. "She's just a hired hand we keep around out of pity." The woman, I would later learn her name was Margaret Sterling, looked at me the way you'd look at a stray dog that had wandered onto your lawn. Distasteful. Dismissive. Bella continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "That's the hired manager for the family. She's a bit greedy and difficult, so it's best not to interact with her." Rage exploded in my chest, hot and immediate. I opened my mouth to scream, to announce to everyone assembled that I owned every square inch of this property, that Bella was trespassing, that this entire party was a fraud. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the look on Margaret Sterling's face, that aristocratic disdain, the certainty that I was beneath her notice. Maybe it was the way Bella was watching me, a tiny smirk playing at the corner of her mouth, daring me to make a scene. Or maybe it was the realization that if I confronted her now, in front of all these people, she'd find some way to spin it. She'd cry. She'd claim it was all a misunderstanding. She'd make me look like the villain. So I did something Bella would never expect. I stayed silent. I let them think I was the hired help. I let them believe the lie. I turned away from the terrace and walked slowly around the side of the villa, heading for the staff entrance near the kitchen. Behind me, I heard the party resume, the music and laughter swelling again as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Bella had exploited my travel schedule to hijack my property. She'd brought strangers into my home, served them my food and wine, pretended to be someone she wasn't, and she'd done it all while I was supposed to be thousands of miles away, none the wiser. She'd calculated this, planned it, committed to it, and now I was going to make her pay. I slipped through the staff entrance, tracking mud across the tile floor of the service hallway. I needed to get to my office. I needed to understand exactly what was happening here, how Bella had managed to pull this off, and then I needed to destroy her. I made my way down the staff hallway, the narrow corridor lit by fluorescent tubes that hummed overhead. This was the part of the villa that guests never saw the working guts of the estate, all industrial carpet and white-painted walls. I'd walked this corridor 1,000 times, but never like this. Never as an intruder in my own home. My boots left muddy prints on the carpet. Water dripped from my coveralls onto the floor. I didn't care. I was too angry to care about anything except getting answers. The executive office was at the end of the hall, past the supply closets and the employee break room. I pushed open the door without knocking. Sarah looked up from the computer, her eyes going wide. "Miss Aldridge?" Her voice came out as a squeak. "I thought you were in Paris." Sarah Miller was 24, fresh out of hospitality school, and had only been working at Aldridge Estate for 2 weeks. She was eager and competent, but inexperienced. The kind of person who followed instructions without asking too many questions. The kind of person Bella could manipulate. I stood in the doorway, mud dripping onto the polished marble floor of the office, and fixed Sarah with a stare that could freeze wine in the bottle. "Why is there a party at my mansion, Sarah?" She went pale. I thought you approved it. I got an email." "Show me." Her hands shook as she pulled up her inbox and turned the monitor toward me. There it was, sent 3 days ago, from an address that looked almost exactly like mine. Catherine.aldridge@aldridgeestate.com. Almost, but not quite. The real address was Catherine.aldridge@aldridgewinery.com. This one was missing the W in winery. A tiny difference, easily missed by someone who didn't know better. The email read, "Sarah, I approve lending the villa to Bella's family this weekend for free. Please coordinate with the catering staff and open the event spaces as needed. Do not disturb me while I am in Paris. I will not be checking email regularly. Catherine." I read it twice, my jaw tightening with each word. This wasn't just a family misunderstanding. This wasn't Bella getting confused or overstepping boundaries. This was premeditated fraud. Creating a fake email identity to misappropriate property, that's wire fraud, a federal crime. The kind of thing that carries a prison sentence if you're unlucky enough to get caught. Bella had calculated every step. She'd known I'd be out of the country. She'd known Sarah was new and wouldn't question an email that looked official. She'd set up a fake account, sent fraudulent authorization, and then waltzed into my home like she owned it. There was no room for the innocent mistake defense. Not anymore. It's not your fault, I said, and was surprised to hear my voice come out calm, cold. The Ice Queen voice that made staff members straighten their spines and pay attention. You did what you thought you were supposed to do. Sarah looked like she might cry. I'm so sorry, Miss Aldridge. I should have called to confirm. What's done is done. I moved to the desk, tracking mud across the expensive carpet, and picked up the clipboard that held the service request forms. Show me everything they ordered. Sarah handed over the papers with trembling hands. I scanned the list, and my blood pressure spiked with every line item. Kobe, beef tenderloin, $3,200. White truffles, $1,800. Lobster tail, $2,400. A custom 7-tier cake from San Francisco, $1,500. Vintage champagne, cases of it, $8,000. Floral arrangements, $6,000. The string quartet, $4,500. Valet parking service, $2,000. And there, at the bottom of the second page, the item that made my hands clench into fists. Special request. Open vintage wine cellar. Guest selection permitted. The vintage cellar. The locked room in the basement where I kept my most valuable bottles, wines from my grandfather's era, rare vintages that I'd been collecting and aging for years. Some of those bottles were worth $5,000 apiece, and Bella had given strangers permission to drink them. I did the math in my head. The total bill for this party was $85,400. $85,400. For an afternoon of pretending to be someone she wasn't. Sarah, I said quietly, from this moment on, you only listen to me. Do you understand? She nodded frantically. Yes, Miss Aldridge. Stay in this office. Don't go outside. Don't talk to anyone. If Bella comes looking for you, you're in the restroom. Got it? Yes, ma'am. I turned to leave, then spotted something on the edge of Sarah's desk. The wireless credit card terminal, a portable POS machine that we used for private tastings and events. Small, black, about the size of a paperback book. I grabbed it and shoved it into the chest pocket of my coveralls. I'm going to need this, I said. Sarah's eyes widened, but she didn't ask questions. Smart girl. I left the office and headed deeper into the staff corridor, toward the security wing. My boots squelched with every step. The mud on my coveralls had started to dry in places, forming a stiff, uncomfortable crust against my skin. I didn't care. I wanted to stay dirty. I wanted to look exactly like this when I confronted Bella, muddy, disheveled, a walking reminder of who actually worked to maintain this estate while she played dress-up with stolen luxury. The security office was in the basement, accessible only through a keycard lock. I swiped my card and pushed open the heavy door. Frank Miller, our head of security, looked up from his monitors. He was in his 50s, built like a retired linebacker, with gray hair buzzed military short. He'd worked for my family for 20 years. If anyone was going to have my back, it was Frank. Catherine? He stood up, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. What the hell is going on? I saw the cars, but Sarah said. Sarah got a fake email, I interrupted. Bella's throwing a party. In my house. Without my permission. Frank's jaw tightened. You want me to shut it down? Not yet. I moved to the monitor wall, where 12 screens showed different views of the estate. I found the one that displayed the main dining room and terrace. First, I want to see exactly what we're dealing with. I pulled up a chair, mud and all, and sat down to watch my sister's party unfold on camera. The tech room was cramped and utilitarian, all concrete walls and humming equipment. It smelled like electronics and old coffee. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered occasionally, casting everything in a harsh, unflattering glow. It was the opposite of the luxury happening upstairs. Down here, there was no champagne, no string quartets, no illusion of elegance, just me, Frank, and the truth displayed on 12 security monitors. I didn't change clothes. The mud on my coveralls had dried completely now, forming a stiff, uncomfortable shell that pulled at my skin with every movement. It itched terribly. Bits of dried dirt flaked off whenever I shifted in my chair. But I didn't move. I wanted to feel this discomfort. I wanted it to fuel my rage, to remind me exactly why I was about to burn Bella's world to the ground. Frank. I said, my eyes fixed on the monitors. Lock down all exits. No one in, no one out. He picked up his radio without hesitation. Copy that. I'll alert the gate staff. On the main screen, I watched the party unfold in real time. Bella was holding court in the grand ballroom now, surrounded by guests who hung on her every word. The tall man beside her, her fiancé, I assumed had his arm around her waist. He was handsome in that generic privileged way. Strong jaw, expensive haircut, the kind of casual confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Preston Sterling, according to the guest list Sarah had shown me, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, net worth in the billions. The kind of catch that would make Bella's dreams come true, a lifetime of luxury, without having to work for any of it. The older couple stood nearby. Margaret Sterling, the silver-haired woman in pearls who'd looked at me like I was dirt, literally, and a man I assumed was Preston's father, equally polished and aristocratic. Frank adjusted the audio feed, and suddenly I could hear them. Absolutely stunning property, Margaret was saying, her voice crisp and cultured. How long has it been in your family, Bella, dear? Bella's laugh was musical, practiced. Oh, generations. My great-grandfather built the main house in the 20s. The vineyard has been ours ever since. Lies. All of it lies. And the management? Margaret continued. You mentioned a hired administrator? Catherine. Yes. Bella's tone shifted, becoming dismissive. She's competent enough, I suppose, but she can be difficult. Very territorial about the day-to-day operations. My parents keep her on out of loyalty to her family. They've worked here for decades, but honestly, she's a bit grasping. My fingernails dug into the arms of the chair. Preston spoke up for the first time, his voice smooth and pleasant. Will that be a problem after the wedding? I thought you said we could use this place as a vacation home. Oh, it won't be a problem. Bella's smile was radiant on the monitor. I told you, our grandparents left this estate to my parents. Catherine is just hired help. After the wedding, we can make whatever staffing changes we want. We could even convert part of the vineyard into a golf course if we wanted to. A golf course! Margaret clapped her hands. What a marvelous idea! I felt Frank tense beside me. Boss, he said quietly. She just committed fraud on camera. We have her dead to rights. Want me to call the sheriff? I watched Bella on the screen, saw her throw her head back and laugh at something Preston said. She looked so happy, so confident. She genuinely believed she'd gotten away with it. Not yet, I said. Frank frowned. Why not? Because right now, she can claim it was all a misunderstanding, a miscommunication between family members. I pointed at the monitor, where a waiter was approaching Bella with a question. But if she opens those wine bottles, if she drinks my property without permission, then it's not intent anymore. It's a completed crime. You want to let her finish the party? I want irrefutable proof. I reached into my pocket and felt the weight of the POS machine. I want her to rack up every penny of that bill. I want her to stand in front of those Sterling family billions and play pretend until she can't take it back. Understanding dawned on Frank's face. And then you walk in. And then I walk in. He nodded slowly. All right. I'll keep the team on standby. But Catherine, he hesitated. What? She's your sister. She called me hired help, I said flatly. She told strangers I was greedy and difficult. She tried to steal my life. I turned back to the monitors. She stopped being my sister the moment she sent that fake email. Frank didn't argue. He just nodded and picked up his phone. I'll have the sheriff's hotline ready. When you give the word, I can report grand larceny. Grand larceny. In California, that meant theft of property valued over $10,000. It was a felony. Years in prison, if convicted. The wine cellar alone would push the total past that threshold. On the monitor, I watched as a waiter approached with a bottle dark glass, old label. Even from the grainy security footage, I recognized it. Vintage 1998 Cabernet, one of my grandfather's bottles, worth $5,000. Bella nodded enthusiastically. The waiter opened it, poured 5 glasses, distributed them to Bella, Preston, and his parents. They raised their glasses, toasted, drank. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, not quite revenge, just certainty. Now we wait, I said. We sat in that cramped tech room for over 3 hours, a vigil of anger and patience. I didn't move from the chair, didn't shower, didn't eat, didn't even go to the bathroom. I just sat there, covered in drying mud, watching the party unfold on 12 different screens. Frank brought me water at one point, and I drank it without tasting it. My entire focus was on the monitors, on cataloging every crime, every transgression, every moment of Bella's delusion. As the afternoon light began to fade around 4:30, they opened a second bottle from the vintage cellar. Another $5,000 gone. 45 minutes later, the caterers brought out the Kobe beef, perfectly seared, plated on china I'd inherited from my grandmother. Margaret Sterling declared it divine. By 6 o'clock, Bella was ready to give her speech. She stood on the terrace with Preston, his arm around her shoulders, and thanked everyone for coming to celebrate their engagement. She talked about how excited she was to start this new chapter of her life, how grateful she was to have found a partner who understood her. She didn't mention me once. "This is hard to watch," Frank muttered. I said nothing. The dried mud was cracking on my arms now, falling in tiny flakes onto the floor. My skin underneath felt raw and irritated. I welcomed the discomfort. Let myself feel it. Let it sharpen the edge of my anger into something clean and surgical. Around 6:45, Margaret Sterling pulled Bella aside for a private conversation in the study. I switched the audio to that room's feed. "Very impressed with the property," Margaret was saying. "Preston has always wanted a wine country retreat. If you're serious about making this available after the wedding, I'd like to discuss terms." "Terms?" Bella's voice was careful. "A financial arrangement. We'd purchase a stake in the property, of course. Become partners with your family. I'm thinking something in the neighborhood of $3 million. $3 million. For a share of property Bella didn't own. I felt Frank look at me, but I kept my eyes on the screen. "That's very generous," Bella said slowly. "Think about it." Margaret patted her hand. "Talk to your parents. We can have our lawyers draw something up next week." Bella smiled. "I'll definitely discuss it with them." "Good." Margaret stood. "Now shall we rejoin the party? I believe they're about to cut the cake." They left the study. I switched back to the main ballroom feed. "She's going to sell your property to them," Frank said. "That's her game. Use the engagement to gain their trust, then broker a fake real estate deal." "I know. We should stop this now, before it goes any further." "Not yet." He slammed his hand on the desk. "Catherine, this isn't just about the party anymore. She's setting up a con that could land her in federal prison." "Good. She's your sister." I finally looked at him. She stopped being my sister when she decided I was disposable. When she looked at everything I've built and thought she could just take it. I stood up, dried mud raining off my coveralls. "I gave her chances, Frank. I loaned her money. I offered her a job here, real work, with real pay. She turned it down because it wasn't glamorous enough. She wanted the rewards without the effort, and now she's trying to steal them. So you're going to let her commit fraud on camera. I'm going to let her commit every crime she's capable of committing, and then I'm going to make sure she faces every consequence she deserves." Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, your call, boss." On the monitor, the party reached its peak. Guests clustered around as the massive cake was wheeled out, 7 tiers of white fondant and gold leaf, topped with sugar flowers that probably cost more than most people's wedding rings. Bella and Preston stood together, holding the knife, smiling for a photographer I hadn't even noticed until now. They cut the first slice together, fed each other bites, kissed while everyone applauded. The clock on the wall struck 7. 4 hours since the champagne cork had hit my shoulder. 4 hours of watching my sister play pretend in my house with my things. I reached into my pocket and felt the POS machine. The weight of it was reassuring. Solid. Real. "It's time," I said. Frank stood up. "You want the security team?" "Gather them," I said. "But let me enter first. I want them to see me alone." "Understood." I walked to the door, then paused. "Frank? Have that sheriff's hotline ready. If she doesn't cooperate, I'm pressing charges immediately." "Will do." I left the tech room and walked back through the staff corridor, retracing my muddy steps from earlier. But this time, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't sneaking around my own property like a criminal. This time, I was walking toward the main ballroom with purpose. The POS machine sat heavy in my pocket. In my mind, I ran through the numbers one more time. $85,400. Grand larceny. Wire fraud. Trespassing. Impersonation. Bella had built herself a trap out of champagne glasses and lies, and now she was standing in the middle of it, smiling for cameras, dreaming of millions. I was about to spring it. I reached the service door that led to the main ballroom, put my hand on the handle, took one deep breath, and then I pushed it open and stepped into the light. The main doors to the dining room didn't just open, they were thrown wide. I didn't wait for an announcement. I walked straight in. My rubber boots landed with a heavy, wet thud against the polished marble floor, leaving muddy footprints with each step. My coveralls were caked with dried earth that flaked off as I moved, creating a trail of dirt across Margaret Sterling's pristine white runner. My hair, which I deliberately left wild and tangled, hung in matted clumps around my face. I could feel dried mud cracking on my cheeks when I set my jaw. The contrast was perfect. Around me, a sea of silk and satin, champagne flutes and pearl necklaces, $1,000 updos and designer heels. The air smelled of expensive perfume and catered hors d'oeuvres. Crystal chandeliers cast everything in a warm, golden glow. And there I stood, the swamp monster at the ball. Every eye in that room locked onto me. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone's fork clattered against their plate. In the corner, a guest gasped audibly, hand flying to their mouth. I didn't look at any of them. My eyes found Margaret Sterling's table in the back corner, the power position, naturally, and I walked straight toward it. Each footstep echoed in the sudden silence. Thud, crunch, thud, crunch. Bella saw me first. She stood so fast her chair scraped backward. You're supposed to be in. I reached past Preston's shoulder, past his untouched plate of herb-crusted salmon, and wrapped my muddy fingers around the neck of the wine bottle, sitting in the center of their table. The vintage 1998 Cabernet Sauvignon. I held it up to the light, examining the label with exaggerated care. The bottle was already open, breathing in a crystal decanter that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. About a third of it had been poured out into the glasses around the table. Frank, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. Behind me, the doors opened again. Frank stepped in, flanked by two uniformed security officers. They didn't draw weapons, but they stood with a military precision that sucked the oxygen out of the room. I don't recall signing a release order for this 1998 vintage, I said, not taking my eyes off the bottle. Frank pulled out a tablet from his jacket, made a show of scrolling through it. His face remained professionally neutral. No release order exists, Miss Aldridge. I've checked the inventory logs twice. Huh. I turned the bottle slowly, letting everyone get a good look. Because this particular vintage? Market value is $5,000 per bottle. I heard the whispers start then, a ripple of shock moving through the crowd. 5,000? She's joking. Did she say per bottle? I set the bottle down with a deliberate clunk and turned my full attention to Bella. My little sister had gone absolutely white. Even her lips had lost their color, making her carefully applied lipstick look garish against her skin. Receiving stolen property valued over $10,000. I said conversationally, is grand larceny in the state of California, and considering you've already consumed about $1,700 worth of this particular bottle, and I can see at least 2 more empties on that side table, I gestured, with my muddy hand, toward the discarded bottles. We're well past that threshold. Preston started to stand. Now wait, sit down, Margaret said quietly. He sat. I pulled the wireless POS machine from my coverall pocket. A clump of dried mud fell off it and landed on the white tablecloth. Here's how this works, Bella. You're going to pay the $85,400 you charged to this estate's accounts, right now. Or you're going to leave here in a Napa County Sheriff's cruiser. Your choice. This is insane. Bella's voice pitched higher. This is my engagement party. You can't just... Wire fraud. I held up one finger. That fake email you sent pretending to be me? That's wire fraud. Federal offense. Another finger. Criminal trespass. You're not authorized to be on this property. A third finger. Grand larceny. We just covered that one. I smiled. And I knew it wasn't pretty. Want me to call in the sheriff? He's on standby. 5 minutes out. I can have you in handcuffs before dessert is served. You're bluffing. But Bella's hand trembled as she reached for her purse. Try me. The room had gone so quiet I could hear the ice melting in someone's water glass 3 tables away. Bella pulled out her card with shaking fingers. It was a premium card. I noticed the kind with no preset spending limit. The kind she'd probably sweet-talked some bank manager into giving her based on her impending marriage to wealth. I held out the POS machine. She swiped. We all waited. The machine beeped once, twice. Then it displayed in bright red letters. Transaction declined. Oh, that was sweet. That's not possible, Bella whispered. She grabbed the card back, stared at it like it had personally betrayed her. Try it again. I didn't move. The machine works fine. You want to try another card? I don't have another card. This is Mom? She turned desperately to our mother, who was sitting 2 tables away looking like she wanted to sink through the floor. Mom, your card? I need. Turns out $85,000 is slightly above your credit limit. Funny how that works. Bella's breathing had gone shallow and rapid, panic attack territory, but I wasn't quite done yet. So here's what's happening, Bella. You have exactly 2 options. Option 1. You pay what you owe right now with cash or a valid card. Option 2. I press charges, you get arrested for multiple felonies, and this whole party becomes a crime scene. The champagne stops flowing, the catering gets shut down, and all these lovely people, I gestured around the room, get to watch you do the perp walk in your engagement dress. Personally, I think option 1 is better for everyone involved, but I'm flexible. She can't pay. Preston finally found his voice. Can't you see she doesn't have it? We'll figure something out. We'll arrange a payment plan or... A payment plan. I let the words hang in the air. For stolen goods. That's not how this works, Preston. A chair scraped. Margaret Sterling stood. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Margaret was the kind of woman who commanded attention without trying 70 years of inherited wealth and social power, radiating from her like heat from asphalt. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon. Her navy dress probably cost more than my truck. Diamond earrings caught the light when she moved. She looked at me. Really, looked at me. I was covered in mud. My hair was a disaster. I was wearing rubber boots to her granddaughter's engagement party. By every social measure, I should have been beneath her notice, something to be removed by staff, an embarrassment to be dealt with quietly. But Margaret Sterling didn't look embarrassed. She looked to assessing. Her eyes traveled from my muddy boots to my stained coveralls, to my tangled hair, and then back to my face. And in that moment, I saw something shift in her expression. It was subtle, a slight narrowing of her eyes, a tiny quirk at the corner of her mouth. Recognition. Not of me, exactly. Recognition of what I was. A predator looking at another predator. A woman who understood power, looking at another woman who'd just demonstrated it. She despised Bella. I could see that clearly now. Despised the gold digging, the manipulation, the transparent greed. But me? The woman who'd crashed her grandson's engagement party looking like a swamp creature, who'd backed her future daughter-in-law into a corner with cold precision, who'd chosen public humiliation as a weapon. Me, she respected. Margaret reached into her clutch and pulled out a card. Not just any card. A Black Centurion card, American Express's invitation-only monster, the one with no spending limit at all. She placed it on the table with a soft click. Swipe it, she said. $85,400. Oh my God. Bella's face lit up with desperate relief. Oh, I knew you'd under. Shut up. The 2 words were delivered with such cold precision that Bella's mouth snapped closed mid-syllable. Margaret didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on me. I'm not paying for her. I'm paying to buy silence. There's a difference. Do we understand each other, Miss Aldridge? I picked up the card, swiped it through the machine. The approval came through in less than 2 seconds. Transaction approved. $85,400. I held out the receipt. Margaret took it, folded it precisely in half, and tucked it into her clutch. Then I did something that surprised even me. I looked at Frank and gave a single, slight shake of my head. His hand moved away from his radio. the police sitting in their cruiser 5 minutes away, ready to roll would stay put. This was done. This was a civil compromise. Money had exchanged hands. The debt was paid. I didn't need my sister in handcuffs and a mugshot. I just needed her, broken. And judging by the way she was trembling, by the tears starting to track through her makeup, by the absolute devastation on her face as she realized what had just happened, that her future mother-in-law had bought her like property, that everyone in this room had just watched her hit rock bottom, I'd succeeded. Margaret turned to face Bella for the first time. My lawyer will arrive tomorrow morning at 9. You will sign every document she places in front of you. You will not argue. You will not negotiate. You will not call your mother or your sister or anyone else for advice. Do you understand? Bella nodded mutely. I asked you a question. Yes. Bella's voice cracked. Yes, I understand. Good. Margaret straightened her already perfect posture. The wedding will proceed as planned. The Sterling name will not be associated with theft or scandal. You will smile. You will be gracious. You will be the perfect daughter-in-law. Her smile was razor-sharp. And you will remember, every single day, exactly how much you cost me. Every text message, every purchase, every decision you make, I will know about it. Consider yourself managed. She turned back to me and extended her hand. I looked down at my muddy palm, then back at her. I don't shake hands when I'm this filthy, I said. Smart woman. Margaret almost smiled. Almost. My son is an idiot, but my lawyer is exceptional. Your wine will be compensated at full market value for today's borrowing. You'll have a check by Monday. That's not necessary. It's not about necessity. It's about doing business properly. She glanced around the room, at all the frozen, staring faces. I suggest everyone return to their dinners. The evening's entertainment has concluded. Like someone had flipped a switch, the room came back to life. Conversations resumed louder than before, buzzing with gossip. The string quartet started playing again. Forks clinked against plates. I looked at Bella one last time. She'd sunk into her chair, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Preston sat next to her, useless as ever, patting her back with all the effectiveness of a wet paper towel. I scanned the room for my parents. They were standing near the buffet table, frozen. My mother's face was red with fury. My father looked pale. They saw me looking and started to move toward me, my mother's mouth already opening to launch into some lecture about family and forgiveness and how could I do this. Frank, I said quietly, escort Mr. and Mrs. Aldridge off the property. They're no longer welcome at the estate. You can't, my mother started as she got within earshot. I can. I did. Goodbye. Frank moved between us like a wall. Two of his team materialized beside him. My parents had the good sense not to argue, not here, not now, not in front of Margaret Sterling and half of Napa Valley's social elite. I turned and walked back toward the doors, my muddy boots making that heavy, satisfying thud with every step. Behind me, I heard Margaret's voice, clear and carrying. Someone get this girl a proper glass of wine, not the stolen vintage, something appropriate. I smiled as I pushed through the doors into the cool night air. The mud on my clothes wasn't dirt. It was a medal of honor. And I'd just won the war. 6 months later, I am standing in the middle of the North Vineyard, and the world is heavy with fruit. The Merlot grapes hang in thick clusters from the vines, their dark purple skin nearly black in the late afternoon sun. I reach out and cup one cluster in my palm, feeling the weight of it, the firmness. Perfect. Another week and we'll start the harvest. Thanks to my decision to come back early that Friday to prioritize the vines over a fake Paris trip, we saved the entire crop. The irrigation system that needed emergency adjustment, the pest situation that required immediate intervention, the weather pattern that would have been catastrophic if left unmanaged for another 3 days, all handled. All saved. The financial damage from that decision? About $800 in lost deposits for the Paris hotel, and a few hundred more for the canceled first-class ticket. The financial gain? This harvest alone will generate close to $500,000 in revenue once bottled and distributed. I'm pretty good at math. That's a favorable exchange rate. A breeze moves through the vineyard, rustling the leaves, carrying the sweet, sharp smell of ripening grapes. My boots clean this time, practical work boots instead of the rubber monstrosities from that night crunch on the gravel path between rows. The sun is warm on my shoulders. The sky is that particular shade of California blue that makes you understand why people pay millions for property here. My phone buzzes. I pull it out and see a text from Frank. Sterling wedding photos hit the social media today. Thought you might want to know. I don't need to look at them. I already know exactly what they show. The wedding went ahead as planned, of course, after the engagement party disaster, with all the pomp and circumstance Margaret Sterling could arrange. Bella got her fairy tale venue, her designer dress, her 5-tier cake, her string quartet and rose petals, and everything she'd ever dreamed of. She also got her prison sentence. Because Bella is now Mrs. Preston Sterling, living in the Sterling family compound, and she might as well be wearing an ankle monitor. Margaret's lawyer, who is indeed exceptional, had drawn up an airtight postnuptial agreement that essentially made Bella a very well-dressed employee. Every purchase over $500 requires pre-approval. Every text message, every phone call, every lunch with friends monitored and managed. She has a clothing allowance, a personal spending account with strict limits, and absolutely zero financial autonomy. She got exactly what she wanted: wealth, status, the Sterling name. She just had to trade her freedom for it. My mother calls me cruel for allowing it. She sent me 17 text messages in the past month alone, each one a variation on the same theme. How can you let Margaret treat your sister like this? How can you stand by and watch Bella suffer? Don't you have any compassion? Any family loyalty? I delete them all without responding. Because here's what my mother doesn't understand, what she's never understood. I didn't do anything to Bella. Bella made her choices. She chose to steal. She chose to lie. She chose to commit wire fraud and trespass and grand larceny. She chose to try to manipulate and con her way into wealth. All I did was refuse to be her victim. All I did was enforce consequences. And when Margaret Sterling offered to handle those consequences in her own way, to buy Bella's compliance and future behavior with the one thing Bella valued above all else, money and status, I didn't stand in the way. Margaret and I have an understanding now. We're not friends. We don't have lunch dates or exchange Christmas cards. But we respect each other. We recognize each other. Two women who understand that power isn't given, it's taken, and that sometimes the cruelest kindness is letting people face the natural consequences of their actions. She sends me a case of wine every month. Top shelf, properly released from inventory, with all the correct paperwork. I send her quarterly updates on the vineyard's performance, and occasionally consult on her own wine investments. It's a good arrangement. My parents, on the other hand, are permanently banned from the Aldridge estate. They haven't contested it. After the engagement party, after being escorted off the property by security, they seemed to finally understand that their enabling days were over. No more emergency loans for Bella. No more guilt-tripping me into bailing her out. No more family dinners, where I'm expected to just forgive and forget, and pretend everything is fine. They made their choice. They chose Bella. They chose to support her theft and lies right up until the moment it became publicly undeniable. So I chose me, and the vineyard, and a future without parasites. Sarah, incidentally, quit 2 weeks after the incident. She sent me a resignation email that was 3 paragraphs of apologies and 1 paragraph of notice. Apparently, the guilt of being manipulated into corporate fraud even unknowingly was too much for her. She's working at a tourist winery now, giving tastings and selling souvenir corkscrews. It suits her better. I walk to the end of the vineyard row and look back toward the main villa. The sun is starting to sink lower, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The building looks almost ethereal in this light, all elegant stone and curved archways, generations of family history wrapped in ivy and weathered grace. It's mine. Fully, completely, without question. No more emergency loans being siphoned off to support someone else's delusions. No more inventory mysteriously disappearing for family events. No more having to choose between being a good sister and being a good business owner. I chose business. Turned out that was the right call. My phone buzzes again. This time it's a message from my vineyard manager. Harvest crew confirmed for next week. Looking good, boss. I smile and type back a quick confirmation. Then I walk back to the villa, stopping at the tasting room on the way. I select a bottle from the reserve collection, not the 1998 vintage, something newer but equally good, and pour myself a glass. The wine is the color of rubies in the fading light, complex and rich with notes of blackberry and oak. I take it outside to the terrace, where I can watch the sun finish setting over my vines. The mud on my body that night wasn't humiliation. It wasn't the mark of someone who'd been degraded or brought low. It was armor. It was a statement. It was proof that I'd prioritized what mattered: the vines, the harvest, the real work over appearances and social performance. And when I walked into that dining room looking like a swamp monster, I wasn't the one who should have been embarrassed. They were. Bella and Preston and all those people in their designer clothes, drinking stolen wine, celebrating fraud. They were the embarrassment. They were the ones trafficking in lies and theft and empty status. I was just the woman who'd been working, who'd been doing something real and valuable and productive while they played dress-up and pretended their world mattered. I sip my wine and watch the stars start to appear in the darkening sky. Worth it? That's the question my mother keeps asking. Was it worth destroying your relationship with your sister? Worth tearing the family apart? Worth being so cold, so cruel, so unforgiving? Here's my answer. Look at my vineyard. Look at my harvest. Look at my business thriving and growing and succeeding. Look at me standing here, debt-free, parasite-free, free. Yeah, it was worth it. So here's where I turn it over to you guys, because I genuinely want to know what you think. My sister got her dream wedding, her wealthy husband, her place in Napa Valley society. She got everything she said she wanted. The fact that it came with strings attached, okay, more like chains attached, isn't my fault. She made her choices. My mother says I'm cruel. She says I should have handled it privately, should have changed into a nice dress, should have confronted Bella quietly without humiliating her in front of 100 guests. She says letting Margaret enslave Bella over money makes me just as bad as the people I claim to despise. But here's my question for you. Option A. Did I go too far? Should I have cleaned up, put on something presentable, and handled the whole situation behind closed doors? Would that have been the right thing to do? Option B. Or was the muddy entrance the perfect power move? Was walking in there looking like I'd just crawled out of a swamp, showing everyone exactly where I'd been and what I'd been doing while they played their social games, the only way to make the point? Let me know in the comments. Would you have called the cops and pressed charges? Would you have taken Margaret's money and walked away? Or would you have done something completely different? I read every single one of them. And trust me, after 6 months of my mother's guilt trips, I could use some outside perspective. Because from where I'm standing in my vineyard, with my wine, watching my harvest ripen under a California sunset, I think I made exactly the right call. But maybe that's just me. What do you think?